Grant Cardone is one of the most high-energy, hard-working, charismatic, and controversial businessmen of our generation. And it's easy to be fascinated with this guy's success when you realize that he owns about $2 billion worth of real estate. He's a New York Times best-selling author. He's a social media influencer, and he has about 200,000 monthly active users as a part of his online sales university. With a net worth of over $300 million today, Grant isn't shy about flaunting his success online at all, sharing his lavish vacations, his trips on his private jets, and his fancy cars. But what's crazy is if you rewind 30 years and you look back at his teens and his early 20s, he was in a much darker place. In today's video, we're going to talk about who Grant Cardone is, what his upbringing looked like, how he made his millions, and then what business endeavors that he's involved in today. I made a similar video a couple of weeks ago about another real estate mogul, Ben Mallah, and you guys responded really well to that video, so I felt like it was kind of a fitting time to do another similar formatted video about a different person. And I loosely say similar because yes, Grant and Ben are two very different individuals with two very different investing strategies and sets of values, but they both have achieved massive success at relatively young ages, so they're both inspiring individuals because of that. If you're new to my channel, my name is Scott. I'm a real estate investor and I've been doing this for about 10 years now. I've got experience with everything from wholesaling to house flips and Airbnb rentals to commercial rentals. My YouTube channel is a mix of content like this, plus me sharing stories of real life real estate deals that I'm actively involved in. So if you're into that kind of thing, think about hitting subscribe. And let's get into talking about Grant Cardone. But before we go any further, just as always, if you guys wouldn't mind, just hit the like button down below for me because that would really help me out a lot. Grant often speaks of his upbringing as something that was a big contributor to his success today. So let's talk about that first. He was born March 21st, 1958 in Louisiana, and he had a pretty tight-knit family growing up with a twin brother and 3 other siblings. At the age of 10, Grant sadly lost his father, which he's often talked about leaving a really big void in his life due to his father being such a successful man and a mentor figure to Grant. He actually looked at some of his surviving friends and family members as less ambitious than his father, which he says eventually rubbed off on him and sadly led him down the path of using drugs through his teens and early 20s. This chapter of his life was really bad. He was severely underweight, he was using drugs daily, and he had a gray complexion. There was even a time where he was hanging out with a rough crowd and he got into a fist fight and he was beaten up so badly that when his mother visited him at the hospital, she couldn't even recognize him. The streak of addiction, though, is something that Grant has never been shy about sharing. In fact, he says that in many ways, this chapter of his life actually motivated him and drove him to be the successful businessman that he is today. After a stay in rehab at the age of 25, Grant was drug-free and he became obsessively committed to being successful because he was just so burnt out on being broke, so he figured why not channel this energy into something other than drugs and instead focus on business. He was working at car dealerships at the age of 25, making $3,000 per month, and by the age of 30, he made his first $1 million through an endeavor consulting other car dealerships. His work ethic during this chapter of his life was much like any other successful person, putting in 95-hour work weeks, listening to self-improvement tapes, and immersing himself in content that helped him to improve his sales techniques. So we know that Grant made his first million by the age of 30, but how did he then grow that to a net worth that's estimated to be over $300 million? The short answer is through real estate and through sales, but let's dive a little bit deeper into how he got there. And something important to note that definitely has fueled his success is that Grant has always had a mindset that many other millionaires have, and that is that there is no shortage of money in the world. Rich and successful people have this mindset that if they come up with an idea or an invention or an investment strategy that they might not be able to afford or fund themselves, that there are plenty of people out there in the world who would be willing to lend them money if the idea is good enough. And I can say that that's definitely true in my experience as well, because like I said before, I've been investing in real estate for about 10 years now and I've done dozens of deals, and there's surprisingly a lot of people out there who are willing to lend me money now to invest in real estate at pretty fair rates. It's all about just establishing trust with these investors based on your track record. But anyways, let's get back to how Grant made his millions. His venture into real estate investing was just like any other new real estate investor. He started with a single family house in Texas that he paid $78,000 for and then rented out to tenants. But about 6 months into the lease, the tenants left unexpectedly and Grant was stuck with a payment and no income. He panicked and he ended up selling the place, but he still made money on the deal, turning his initial investment of $3,500 into a profit of $7,000. So he did double his money, but on that day he vowed to never invest in single-family homes again. The next several years he continued to work as a car salesman, but he also was working on his consulting business where he consulted other car dealerships on how to improve their sales, and at this time he was also heavily researching investing in apartments. By Grant's third real estate deal, he bought a 48-unit apartment complex, and at this point he became totally hooked on larger apartments because he realized that with 48 units, even if a few of the tenants couldn't afford their rent or ended up moving out, he could still afford to pay his mortgage payment from the rent that he collected from all of the other tenants. He held on to that 48-unit complex for a while, he did some tenant improvements, and he ended up making $5 million when he sold the place. This kind of life-changing money established a turning point in his mindset and in his business for sure, allowing him to scale his business much more quickly and start buying larger apartment complexes all over the country. Fast forward to today, and he's doing deals 10 times the size of that 48-unit apartment complex, and in many cases he's walking away with 10 times the profit. Now he and his company own billions of dollars worth of real estate, but even to this day he continues to use loans and leverage to take down these deals. Grant's resume is very impressive, and just like most entrepreneurs, he has multiple streams of income. He is the CEO of 7 privately held companies, but here's where he spends most of his time lately. First is Cardone Capital, which is the company where most of his real estate holdings lie, estimated to have holdings of about $2 billion as of the filming of this video, and 4,000 total apartments. The primary focus of Cardone Capital has always been apartments, but I've read recently that he's interested in maybe venturing out into other commercial niches like retail. Cardone Capital is buying massive multifamily apartment complexes that are hand-picked by Grant and his team, and the company is funded primarily by big conventional lenders like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but he also opens up funding to everyday investors, as he calls them, like you and me. His website has a ton of information on how all this works, but to put it simply, you put some money into one of his funds, and then he cuts you a check every month whenever the rent is paid, and then he cuts you another check whenever he sells the property. Full disclosure though, I've never invested with Cardone Capital. I'm not suggesting that you do either, but based on his experience, I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to bring in returns of 15% or more. Then there's another business of his called Cardone University, where he works with smaller companies and larger Fortune 500 companies like Google and Morgan Stanley to help their sales. Then another one on his list of business endeavors is the 10X Growth Conference, which is a huge event that he puts on every year. It's a 3-day motivational and inspirational event where about 12,000 people are in attendance, and he charges as much as $15,000 a seat. He brings in celebrities and motivational speakers, people like Magic Johnson all the way to Snoop Dogg, and the underlying theme of the event is just to ensure that all of the attendees walk away with the motivation to work hard and never give up. Then we can't forget his book sales. He's a New York Times best-selling author, and he's written some highly respected books like The 10X Rule, Sell or Be Sold, and Be Obsessed or Be Average. If you follow Grant on social media, you'll quickly learn that he has seemingly an unlimited amount of energy, and he's constantly working to grow his online brand in an effort to become what he calls omnipresent, meaning he wants as many people on planet Earth as possible to know his name and what he's all about. He has amassed a following of 1.5 million followers on YouTube and over 3 million followers on Instagram, so clearly his social media efforts are paying off. And then the last one of his most fascinating recent endeavors is his feature on a show called Undercover Billionaire, where they basically just take successful entrepreneurs, they strip away all of their money, and then they see if they can build a new business from scratch. I'm not going to spoil the show for you guys, but I will say that Grant made a $1 million bet that he could build a multi-million-dollar company within 90 days, starting with only $100 and a pickup truck. I think that this was a good PR move for him for sure, and it definitely made for entertaining content just because of his wild personality. Let me know in the comments below if you've watched the show. This video would not be complete if I didn't talk about the controversy that surrounds Grant Cardone. First of all, just because of his personality type, there seems to be a love him or hate him relationship that most people have with this guy, and that doesn't surprise me at all. I'll say I fall into the bucket of people who love him and appreciate him for who he is and the value that he offers the world, but I don't blame anybody who feels the opposite. Let's face it, Grant is very loud and aggressive and blunt and flashy and in your face and sometimes even offensive in his delivery when talking about investing or success or being an entrepreneur. And those are the very reasons that I enjoy him and have been motivated by him over the years, but those are also the reasons that a lot of people just think that he's too extreme and a little bit arrogant. But regardless of what side of the fence you're on, he's always brushing off the haters and just becoming more fueled by more people knowing his name, because that's exactly what he wants. On another controversy note though, there were some serious allegations that came up last year that caught the media's attention when a guy from Inglewood, California, who invested $10,000 with Grant Cardone, opened up a class action lawsuit. The claim in the lawsuit was that Grant promised people that he would be paying them a 15% return if they invested their money with him, but those returns never materialized. The properties behind this exact claim were two big deals in Florida that amounted to a total of $100 million in total funds raised and invested. And while there was some content on Grant's Instagram page back then that alluded to making returns like that, from what I understand, there were never any promises or guarantees, so more than likely this guy doesn't have really any grounds for a lawsuit and it'll probably be dismissed. Plus, on top of that, I read somewhere that Grant actually offered to refund this guy his $10,000 when he found out about the lawsuit, but the guy refused, so who knows what his intentions were after all, but this doesn't seem to be slowing down Grant at all. And then there was one other little bit of controversy that also happened last year whenever Grant put out a video on his Instagram that claimed that he was filing for bankruptcy, he was losing everything, including the jets and the cars and the apartments and his family and all of that, and he even joked in the video that he might be being sent to prison. He later came out and said that the bankruptcy announcement was just one big publicity stunt and that he was trying to break into the news outlets. That stirred up a lot of hate and could even lead to some more legal troubles for him if someone tried to say that he was either trying to mislead new investors or existing investors. But this stunt was successful because it grabbed a lot of people's attention, which ended up further growing his audience and followership, which ended up eventually putting more dollars into his pocket. There's no doubt that Grant Cardone is not for everybody due to the nature of his businesses and his aggressive mindset on what it takes to be successful. Because of that, I wouldn't be surprised if the comment section down below is filled up with people who aren't necessarily a fan of him, but that's okay because I'd love to hear your opinions either way. There are two things that none of us can argue though, and the first is that he has an absolutely insane work ethic, and the second is that he is absolutely obsessed with everything sales and real estate. If you enjoyed the video today, one more reminder to hit the like button down below for me if you could before you leave, because that really does help me out a lot. And one more reminder to hit subscribe too if you're not already a subscriber, because I'm not doing $100 million deals like Grant, but I do have some really exciting deals brewing, including 2 residential house flips plus 1 commercial buy and hold property, and I'm sharing all the details of those transactions here on my channel. So stay tuned for that, but that's all I've got for you guys this time, so until next time, see ya!